Hello, dear folks. Welcome to the show. Jack Chow on the East West Show with the Lots of Proud. Yes, of course, we do share with you about everything, every subject, or every element you care about concerning our life. Because we're talking about the fact that we're living in a country of democracy, yet democracy is not an island isolated from anything. It's being hit sometimes from time to time by all kinds of problems. Human trafficking is one of them. If you recall, one of the last year's excellent show was that the one that I was sitting here with my good friend, Oscar Mejia, Chief Lieutenant of Lingowood PD, and also he is the president of the National Latino Peace Officers Association, that in charge of the North Los Angeles chapter.
Yes.
That's a big position.
Yes,
Well, you know,
keeps us pretty busy.
That's
Yes.
a big position. That's a risky position
Right.
too. Oh
Can
my
be,
God! I
yes.
wish I had the kind of gut to do so. So that time we had quite a lengthy discussion about the problem. Yet, while we were approaching the very end, though, we realized that the problem, the subject, being bigger than what we talked about. So we decided, starting the year with, to get another show. Now it is the time to start with the other part of the show. I call it sequel two.
Okay.
Sequel two. President Mejia, welcome to the show. Seriously.
Thank you, Jack, for having me.
All right,
It's a
good.
pleasure.
You know, Oscar, we know we love this country so much. We love the freedom so much.
Yes.
We understand that freedom doesn't come for free,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Has to be earned. Somebody has to put their life, all right, in it
Yes.
to get to it, right?
Right.
So, and at the last show, we talked about the structure, how it works, how the problem is, right?
Right.
And now I would like to get deeper into the problem to see exactly how the problem started to the content of the problem
Right.
and to the cure, if there is one, of the problem. Shall we please?
Yes. Well, human trafficking goes back to the early centuries. I mean, this is nothing new. What we're seeing now is just a form of modern day slavery. People have to understand the difference between human trafficking and human smuggling, because there is a difference.
I see.
And a lot of people think that it's the same thing, but it's not. Human smuggling usually involves a participation of the individual that's being smuggled over, for example, to the United States for a fee. There's an agreement that's worked out. They're smuggled here into the United States willingly, and then when they get here to the U.S., they pay a fee, usually several thousands of dollars. Human trafficking.
To buy to get here.
Yes, you're correct. And there's an arrangement
I see.
prior to. But what happens many oftentimes is the human smuggler or the victim eventually becomes a human trafficking victim once they get here to the United States, because they're brought in under the pretense that we're going to bring you over to the U.S., you're going to pay me my money, and then we both go on our way. However, when they get here, they hold them for ransom, and then they request more money, and then in order for the human smuggler to pay off their debt, they force them into prostitution or drug use as a way to pay off their debt.
I see. That's a downstream of the smuggling.
Yes, they trick their victims, in
I
other words.
see, I
And
see.
human trafficking means that it's done unwillingly. There's usually coercion
I see.
involved. And it's forced upon the victim. That's human trafficking.
I
So
see.
human smuggling starts initially with the cooperation of the
see.
victim.
How are they together? I mean, the human smuggling and human trafficking putting together with the, versus the undocumented immigration or something.
Well, a lot of the undocumented cases we see, whether it's from Mexico, China, the Middle East, that's usually human smuggling. And they're brought in from overseas, and then they're crossed into the United States.
I
and
see.
they pay a fee, like I said, a few $1,000s. And then once they get here to the U.S., everybody goes on their own way, the victim and the smuggler.
I see.
But like I said, human trafficking, again, usually it has to involve the coercion, the threat. a lot of victims are brought over specifically from overseas or from Mexico for human trafficking purposes.
I see.
The victim, however, doesn't really realize that this is going on until they arrive here in the U.S. and they say, okay, you're going to go work at this place.
Okay.
You're going to go work for this person.
With some kind of threat.
Yes.
Right?
Threat or coercion.
Or we'll do this.
Yes.
Or if we will do that. Right?
Correct.
Like that kind.
Yes.
In other words, if I just recognize the problem by say human smuggling is similar to the so-called undocumented immigration or immigrants, right?
Yes.
And then human trafficking is the outcome or the downstream, the deeper layer of the undocumented or of the smuggling.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes. And usually a human trafficking victim, again, like I said, usually ends up being a human smuggling victim, rather, usually turns out to be a human trafficking victim.
Drug trafficking, prostitution, or petty theft, or stealing, or whatever.
Working in a sweatshop. That's
working in a
also
sweatshop.
human trafficking.
Yeah, being exploited.
Yeah, being exploited, correct.
I
yes.
see. Wow.
And we see a lot of that downtown in our garment
That's
industry.
a huge problem.
It's a multi-billion-dollar business.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, it's not only here in the U.S., but it's globally. But we have our borders both in Canada and in the South to Mexico.
Sure.
That
reminds me of one experience many years ago when I was a reporter on the EDI team.
Okay.
I went downtown, I visited one of the sweatshops, which was exposed, was busted for their exploitation.
Yes.
And the working conditions, everything, they get $1 something a day, what kind of things. It's kind of like a jail.
Yes.
Kind of like a jail,
yes.
right?
And they're being held against their will. That's a human trafficking victim.
Yeah. Those poor girls work like day and night for almost nothing.
Yes.
Just a piece of bread, that's it.
Yes, and a lot of times what the offender does in these instances is they feed the victim, they provide shelter, and their wages that they earn, the victims, have to be given to the human trafficker.
Relatively, they are better case because they at least get somewhere somehow to eat, to work.
Yes,
and compared to those who are put to prostitute,
right,
to deal with the drugs.
Right, but it's no different in that. Somebody you have working in a sweatshop is exposed to poor conditions, violence. There's also drugs exposed in those environments. A lot of times they keep their victims drugged up so that mentally they're not able to function properly and get away. So it is bad on both ends, emotionally, physically, and mentally.
I see.
I think the exposure is the same, and the amount of violence that they see on both levels is pretty high.
Yeah. To my dear audience, today is what the deeper layer of the problem that we share with my good friend, Mr. Oscar Mejia, the president of the Latino Peace Officer Association, Los Angeles Northern Chapter.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And also he himself is a lieutenant of the Inglewood PD for many, many years. Well, to people like you, I salute because you guys put yourself in line for the peacekeeping, right? So yeah. Do you have any number or rough numbers about how big the problem, right? To indicate, for example, we have XYZ numbers of them together as being undocumented, and how many of them are actually literally to getting involved in the trafficking. Do we have numbers of that?
Well, it's kind of hard to actually get a specific or exact number because you have to remember a lot of these cases go unreported. So UNICEF and these other organizations have, said ballpark figure globally, it's over 500,000 victims every year. The majority of victims are women and children. However, if they're counting maybe 500,000, you can at least say that it's double or triple that number in reality. But we don't have the exact numbers because a lot of the victims die while they're being trafficked. The bodies are never found. And a lot of victims never come forth. I'm currently working a case right now as we speak with 2 victims that were trafficked over from Mexico and are now here in the United States. They were brought over under the pretense that they were going to get jobs and be working in Hollywood.
All right.
Once they arrived here, their manipulator ended up taking them into shelter and providing physical and mental abuse. ICE and Customs is currently looking into that case, and I'm kind of helping out with the nonprofit organizations that I work with to try to locate these victims. And but they were brought over when they were juveniles or minors. Now they're adults. However, we see a lot of the brainwashing that happens with the offenders in these cases.
Are the monopolators jailed or being incarcerated?
Yes, they are being incarcerated, but what we have to understand that we have so many cases that it's very difficult for law enforcement to keep up with these cases. That's why we need the public to be our eyes and ears. And when they see something like this, to report it so we can get law enforcement involved.
All right, good. So sometimes when we call it some kind of like underground industry, right? Or if it has been an industry anyway, but here so you're talking about live, torture, stuff like that, also involved though. So by judging, I mean, sometimes we judge it by dollar amount, right? So if there any rough dollar amount on an annual basis of being underground, this underground industry?
Well, it's been estimated that conservatively, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Multi-billion with a B?
With a B, yes, that's correct. Yes. A lot of our drug cartels are involved in this because it's making so much money.
Oh my God.
So along with dealing narcotics, they're also involved in human trafficking. Big business.
I see.
And these organizations are going to go where the money goes.
All right.
So yes, a lot of money.
And my audience is really make lots of sense for us to understand what's going on. Like once again, I said, freedom, democracy does not come for free. Well, it has a price. The price being that somebody has to pay for it.
Yes.
Right? Somebody has to work for it. So joining me today is a hero, Mr. Oscar Mejia, the president of the National Latino Peacekeeping Officer Association, in charge of the Northern Los Angeles chapter, Mr. Oscar Mejia. So let's take a short moment now. When we come back, finding more, stay with us, please.